Most people diagnosed with schizophrenia hear voices inside of their heads, and a third of them continue to experience them even when they're on medication. What's particularly fascinating about this phenomenon though, is that the voices often sound indistinguishable from real voices, and sound like they're coming from the real world. But what's even stranger though, is that even neurotypical brains produce these voices. It's just that neurotypical people can't hear them. This video is all about how the brain generates voices in the schizophrenic, why these voices can sound so identical to real life voices, and how even within neurotypical brains, there is a kind of DJ. A DJ which processes real life sounds, and generates its own sounds. Here we see why these voices are generated, and also manipulated, and how this DJ goes mad, within the brain of the schizophrenic patient. Whenever you hear a real sound coming from your external world, your brain activates in an area called the primary auditory cortex, also known as the PAC. Your PAC is located within your temporal lobe, which incidentally is located at the side of your head, right beside of your ears. The primary auditory cortex has its name because it is the first cortical area of your brain that is activated by external sounds, and is fundamental for processing sound components, like sound frequency, rhythm, and speech. Altogether, activity within the primary auditory cortex is therefore thought to generate the perception of hearing something, whether basic noise or voices. And intriguingly, neuroscientists who have investigated the brains of schizophrenics as they experienced hallucinations of voices in what are known as symptom capture studies have found that their primary auditory cortices activate, not just in response to external sounds, but also in response to seemingly nothing at all. This self-generated activity is therefore proposed to generate their hallucinations. However, this kind of self-generated primary auditory cortex activation does not just happen in schizophrenic brains, but in neurotypical brains as well. Your brain is constantly generating its own imagined sounds, such as whenever you expect to hear a noise, whenever you replay an auditory memory, like a song, or whenever you simply sit and think, as part of your inner voice or inner monologue, enabling you to kind of hear your own thoughts, which will become very relevant for us later. However, whether this sound originates from inside of your head or outside of it, a brainwave is nonetheless generated within your primary auditory cortex. This brainwave is called an auditory evoked potential, and within this auditory evoked potential, there is a specific component called the N100. The N100 is a negative decrease in electrical voltage, which occurs whenever your neurons activate, and it is this N100 which is critical for hallucinations. So, as has been covered, your primary auditory cortex generates activity in the form of N100s in response to perceived sounds, whether these sounds are real and emanating from the external world or imagined, such as during memory recall or while you are thinking. However, what is fascinating about this is that other areas of your brain have the ability to modulate these N100s, meaning that they have the ability to change the volume of the sound that you are hearing or imagining. A rather well-known example of this is the cocktail party effect, in which when you are in a crowded room and doing your best to focus on a particular person speaking, your brain effectively turns the volume down on all of the other people talking, allowing you to concentrate on the person that you are focusing on. This is achieved by the brain decreasing the N100 signal of these uninteresting or distracting sounds. However, in addition to this, in neurotypical people, the N100s which correspond to internally generated and imaginary sounds are also reduced, such as those pertaining to your inner thoughts. Therefore, not only does the brain turn the volume down on specific external N100s, but it also turns the volume down on internal N100s too, because neurotypical brains have a bias of processing external N100s over internal ones, because your brain is prioritizing processing external sounds instead, which is why it can be so hard to concentrate on work if you have lots of noisy distractions in the room with you, leading to the idiom of not being able to hear yourself think. But how does this modulation work for schizophrenic brains? For this, we must turn to the final section. When schizophrenic people are experiencing hallucinations of voices, neuroscientists have observed unusual activity within their primary auditory cortex. Specifically, neuroscientists have found that these patients have reduced responses to external sounds, meaning that the N100 appears to be weakened in reaction to real sounds. And conversely, their primary auditory cortex activity is strengthened in response to internal sounds. And together, this produces a bizarre inversion of the bias between external versus internal sounds, pulling the bias toward prioritization of internal sounds instead. Numerous studies theorize that this bias may be a product of an impaired ability to recognize one's own internal sounds as being self-generated, with schizophrenics instead interpreting their internal sounds as originating from a real external source. This appears to be the result of the PAC in schizophrenia having a smaller size, a fact which potentially lowers the threshold for PAC activation, causing the normally weakened internal N100s to no longer be inhibited, making them appear larger and causing them to sound real. But that's a topic for another video.